Let's talk about something that might fundamentally change how you understand certain people in your life. There's a psychological framework called the dark tetrad, and it explains why some individuals can seem so charming, so understanding, and yet cause such devastating harm. This isn't about labeling everyone who hurts us, but about understanding a specific pattern that exists in human psychology and neurology. The dark tetrad consists of 4 personality traits that often cluster together: narcissism, Machiavellianism, psychopathy, and everyday sadism. Now, you might be familiar with some of these terms, but what most people don't realize is how these traits work together to create a particular kind of person who operates very differently from the rest of us. These aren't just behavioral patterns, they're rooted in actual neurological differences. Here's where it gets fascinating and disturbing at the same time. People with these traits possess what researchers call cognitive empathy, which is the ability to understand and read other people's emotions intellectually. They can look at you and know exactly what you're feeling. They can predict your reactions, understand your vulnerabilities, and map out your emotional landscape with precision. But here's the critical difference, the thing that changes everything. While they have cognitive empathy, they fundamentally lack affective empathy. Affective empathy is the capacity to actually feel what another person is feeling, to experience that emotional resonance that makes you care when someone is suffering. It's the difference between knowing someone is in pain and actually feeling moved by that pain. Think of it like a neurological switch that's permanently set to a different position. They can intellectually understand that you're hurting. They can see the tears, recognize the distress signals, understand the emotional content of what you're expressing, but there's no corresponding emotional response inside them. The signal gets received, but never processed into genuine feeling. This disconnect is a core feature of their psychological makeup. This creates something incredibly dangerous because cognitive empathy without affective empathy becomes a precision tool for manipulation. They understand exactly which buttons to push, which words will devastate you, which actions will destabilize you, and they can deploy this knowledge without the natural brake system that empathy provides for most people. There's no internal discomfort stopping them from causing harm. Research shows that highly empathetic individuals, people who feel deeply and care genuinely, become what these personalities consider high-yield supply. You're valuable to them precisely because of your capacity to feel, to give, to nurture, and to hope for connection. Your empathy isn't a weakness, but it does make you visible to people who exploit emotional availability. This vulnerability is exploited by those seeking emotional validation and consistent attention, often draining the empathetic person. The targeting isn't random. There's an unconscious selection process where they're drawn to people who will provide the most substantial emotional reactions, the most resources, the most attention and validation. Your depth becomes their opportunity. Your authenticity becomes their playground. Your emotional richness becomes their extraction site. Their need is bottomless, a void they constantly seek to fill. One of the most devastating tools in their arsenal is intermittent reinforcement, which is sometimes wonderful and sometimes terrible, with no predictable pattern. This creates a psychological trap that's incredibly difficult to escape. Your brain becomes addicted to the good moments, always hoping the next interaction will be like the peak experiences you've had. This unpredictable nature fosters a desperate hope for the positive. Neuroscience has shown that intermittent reinforcement is one of the most powerful conditioning mechanisms that exists. It's the same principle that makes gambling addictive. The uncertainty of the reward creates stronger attachment than consistent positive treatment ever could. You become bonded not despite the pain, but partially because of the contrast between pain and relief. This deeply ingrained pattern makes it incredibly difficult to leave abusive situations and seek consistent, healthy relationships elsewhere. Gaslighting compounds this trauma by making you question your own perception of reality.
when someone consistently denies your experience, contradicts your memory, and insists that your valid reactions are overreactions, it creates profound psychological damage. You begin to distrust your own mind, your own feelings, your own assessment of situations, leading to chronic self-doubt and emotional paralysis in daily life.
What most people don't realize is that this kind of sustained psychological manipulation actually causes physical changes in your brain. The chronic stress affects your hippocampus, which is involved in memory formation. It impacts your prefrontal cortex, which handles decision-making and emotional regulation. The trauma literally reshapes your neurology, proving that psychological abuse is as damaging as physical harm. Here's the part that's hardest to accept, but most important to understand. For many people with dark tetrad traits, these patterns aren't the result of trauma or learned behavior that can be unlearned. They're dealing with what we might call hardware issues rather than software problems. The neurological substrate itself operates differently. This distinction highlights the importance of managing your expectations and focusing on your own well-being. This distinction matters enormously for your healing and your expectations. When we understand something as trauma-based, we naturally hope for healing and change. We invest in that possibility. We give second chances and wait for growth. But when the issue is foundational, built into the biological architecture, that hope becomes a trap that keeps you engaged. It's crucial to acknowledge this reality to protect yourself from unnecessary emotional investment and disappointment, allowing you to move forward. The resistance to change in these personalities isn't stubbornness or lack of trying. It's the fundamental way their brain processes social and emotional information. Asking them to develop genuine affective empathy is like asking someone to develop a new sensory system. The infrastructure simply isn't there. Understanding this is key to ceasing attempts to fix or change them, which is often an exercise in futility, and instead prioritizing self-preservation. So what does this mean for you, for your healing, for your path forward? It means adopting what clinicians call clinical detachment. This doesn't mean becoming cold or unfeeling yourself. It means recognizing that you're dealing with a fundamentally different kind of psychology and protecting yourself accordingly. This approach allows you to engage with necessary boundaries without becoming emotionally depleted or entangled in their psychological framework. Clinical detachment involves observing without absorbing, understanding without personalizing, and recognizing patterns without hoping for exceptions. You begin to see their behaviors as expressions of their internal deficits rather than reflections of your worth or accurate assessments of reality. Their cruelty reveals their emptiness, not your inadequacy. This profound shift in perspective is key to protecting your inner peace and emotional energy. Breaking the emotional bond requires accepting that the person you thought you knew may have never actually existed in the way you experienced them. The version of them that seemed to understand you so deeply was cognitive empathy in action, reading you perfectly, but feeling nothing genuine. That connection you felt was asymmetrical. Acknowledge the illusion. This recognition is the first step toward true separation and self-reclamation. The path to freedom lies in radical acceptance of what is, rather than attachment to what you hoped could be. These individuals won't wake up one day and suddenly feel remorse, suddenly develop the capacity for mutual empathy, suddenly become the person you needed them to be. The neurological switch doesn't flip. The future you imagined with them is not possible, so release the fantasy and embrace your present reality with resolve. Your empathy, your depth, your capacity for genuine connection, these aren't flaws that made you vulnerable. They're profound human qualities that encountered someone fundamentally unable to reciprocate them. The problem was never you. Understanding this at a deep level is how you reclaim your reality and begin to heal. Hold on to your inherent goodness. It is your strength, not your weakness in the face of emotional imbalance. When you recognize that their actions stem from internal deficits they likely cannot change, you stop waiting for acknowledgement, apology, or transformation. You stop trying to be understood by someone neurologically incapable of the kind of understanding you're seeking. You finally, mercifully, let go and redirect that incredible empathy back toward yourself and toward people who can actually receive and reciprocate it.